First, I've got some news. Vikings just went through a massive overhaul. They've added a bunch of new RPG elements and a new hero. You've got to check this out. If you remember all the top RPG and strategy games in the 90s and the 1000s, well, then you're going to love Vikings. The game gives you the ability to do your own playstyle, which is amazing. You can build an impregnable city and raise your economy. That's my favorite part. Or you can use your diplomacy skills to rule the world. You can even get all of your friends together and create a massive army and fight it out on the battlefield. You've got to try Vikings for 5 minutes. You can see why myself and 12 million other people are so addicted to it. Now, Vikings is free to play, so go grab your phone or your axe or whatever and come join me in my game. I go by Odin Makes, of course. Support my channel. Download Vikings using the links below and get your initial protection shield for free and my special bonus of over 200 gold for a fast and successful start. Hello, I'm Odin, and I've got a new set. Yeah, well, so today I'm gonna make something, right? Nah. Yeah, okay, let's make something. I'm gonna make Poe Dameron's helmet from Star Wars: The Force Awakens. To help me with this build, I'm going to use this 1/6 scale toy helmet as a reference. My first step is to make a pattern, so I wrap an old basketball with aluminum foil and cover it with duct tape. I look at the toy helmet and draw the basic shape of the helmet onto the duct tape. I only draw one side because I can flip over my pattern pieces and keep my helmet symmetrical. I'm using Evil Ted Smith's pattern making technique. He has in-depth videos on this process. Check out his YouTube channel for some great tutorials. After breaking the drawing into 3 pattern pieces, I add some registration marks. I'll know how the pattern fits back together and which way is front and which way is back. So I've got my pattern pieces drawn out in the basketball and I'm pretty happy with it, but I can see one big problem. This pattern is made for the basketball, which is perfectly round, and Poe's helmet is not perfectly round. So when I transfer these pieces to a piece of paper, what I want to do is actually add maybe 1.25 inches along this line here. So I'll cut these in half and widen it out. That'll make the whole helmet a little longer. And then along the crest line, I'm going to add another inch, and that'll make the helmet a little bit wider. And I think that'll give me a better shape for what his helmet looks like. I carefully cut off the foil. I can flatten the pieces out now because I'm going to shape the foam later. I trace each foil piece onto some poster board, add my extra spaces where I think I need them, and copy all of the registration marks and labels. And the last label I need to add is to mark them left or right. Since I can flip the pattern pieces over, marking which side goes where is a really helpful idea. On a more complicated pattern, these marks become critical. I use straight pins to hold the patterns in place and copy each side onto some EVA foam floor mat. I also transfer all of the marks and then cut out all 6 pieces. Before I glue them all together, I shape each piece with a heat gun and a planishing stake that I made from a plastic punch ladle. The idea is to pre-shape the curve into each piece of foam. That'll make it easier to assemble and it'll reduce the stress on the glue seams later. I glue all of the parts together with contact cement, always starting with the front and keeping the registration marks together. Because if you ignore the marks, you can end up twisting the foam as you glue it and end up with a warped shape. So I got the helmet done and I realized I had a problem. It was too big. So I adjusted the pattern and I created a much better sized helmet. I want to make the big forehead piece, the part that holds the visor. The toughest thing to figure out was the curve of the foam. Now it's close to the radius of the basketball, but not quite. And after a few tries with poster board and some paper, I get the shapes that I need to start. Now I also want to add a center support because it seems like a good idea. It may not be needed, but whatever. I cut out a strip of foam larger than I need for the visor, and I heat it and shape it, and then try to mark where I need to cut it to fit. Maybe. And even after gluing it on, I need to trim the foam down to fit. The back of the helmet is not round, it's nearly flat. So I cut up a wire coat hanger to brace the back, curling the ends so it won't tear through the foam. I can hold the coat hanger in place with a strip of 5mm craft foam glued over the top of it. There's a mohawk ridge that runs down the helmet, but it's much smaller than the one on Luke's helmet. And it's higher in the back than it is on top. I cut a strip of 5mm foam 1.5 inches wide and a shorter one to include on the back to make it a total of 10mm high. And I use a belt sander to make a long slope on one edge. So when I glue the pieces on, there isn't this big bump going from one layer of foam to 2 layers of foam. And then I use a Dremel to make a slope on the back of the mohawk. There are circles that go over the ears, and they're really close in size to a CD. So I use one to trace the circle onto the foam, and then again onto some 2mm craft foam. I cut out the inside of the 2mm craft foam to make the indentations needed and then glue them together. I can use the belt sander to round off the edges. Now you could just do this with sandpaper as well. You don't need a power tool, but it goes so much faster with a belt sander. Glue the ear bumps on, and the helmet has stiffened up quite a bit. I use 5mm foam for the short extensions off the visor and that thing on the right cheek, and some 2mm foam for the little panel on the back. There is a recessed area on the visor that is painted gray. So I glue some 2mm foam over the whole visor and cut out the recessed part. I didn't want to cut it out completely before I glued it, because I doubt I would have kept the sides of the recessed area straight. So I removed that after I applied the 2mm foam to the visor. Then, on the left cheek, I glue on the teardrop shape that the comm link attaches to. And I add the visor lock on the left side, some more 2mm foam, and a little piece of 5mm foam. I sand down the edges of the 2mm foam with my Dremel using a grinding stone. Then I use it to make some circle divots in the top, and I change the grinding bits to make some rivets in different places, and then an even smaller one to make some really small rivet holes. And you need to keep the Dremel really steady to do this. It's easy to lose control and then grind out an oblong shape. Well, I think that's the major details that I want to put on the helmet. There's a few other things I need to do. I want to line the inside with a polyfoam so it'll fit my head better. I need to make the little comm link that comes off the front, and of course there's goggles. But all that'll come after I paint it, which is next. I'm going to take it outside and spray it down with some black plastic dip as a base coat so I can paint this thing. To make the comm link, I use some found objects like fender washers, an ink pen, and some more coat hanger wire. I'll also add some electronic wires after it's painted. I cut the end of the pen and cut off part of the cap. These will make the T shape on the comm link microphone. I drill holes in the pen cap for some coat hanger to fit through, and a hole for the screw to help keep it all together. And I super glue the coat hanger in place. Then I drill out the helmet to fit the base of the pen, and drill out the bottom of the pen so a screw can pass through it. The skinny part of the pen bottom fits through a 3/8" fender washer, but the wider body doesn't. That way, I can have a washer on both sides of the helmet, and the screw can pass through both pen parts and hold everything in place. I make a sandwich of poster board and 5mm craft foam for the microphone. I hand cut out a circle on one side and add a tiny screw to the other. Then I drill a pilot hole and use super glue to attach it to the coat hanger. For the yellow visor, I have some yellow safety goggles. Now I've had these for a really long time, and I don't remember if they're for shooting or if they're safety glasses or what. But it's time for them to come out of forever storage. But I'll need to modify them, which means I need to artistically break them by removing the arms and cutting off the top ridge. I covered the lenses with some blue tape to protect it from getting scratched. I have some 1-inch dark gray packing foam that I got from the IT department at work when they got some new hard drives. I cut it all up, and then I glued the pieces inside to pad the helmet for a better fit to my head. Now if you don't have any gray foam or you just can't find any, just use a lighter color stuff. You can always wrap it with fabric for a better color. I spray paint the comm link silver, and the washer for the inside is flat black. To paint the helmet, I'm just going to use some artist's acrylic paints. I mix up some gray for the big stripe on the visor and for the bit that goes across the top of the helmet. I'm being very careful to keep the edges clean and even. I also paint the thing on the right cheek and the panel that's on the back the same gray. The red I used would cover the black mostly, but it still took multiple coats. Actually up to 4. And there are red stripes all over this helmet. Okay, wait, pause the video. You see this red stripe right here? I made a big mistake here. It should be farther away from the earpiece. There's some markings that need to go into this black area. And I didn't leave enough frickin' space. Of course, I didn't notice that right now. Okay, let's continue. Then I can add the ivory stripes, and I can use some black acrylic paint to touch up the small details. With the helmet all painted, I can now install the comm link. Now there's no way I think I'm going to be able to hand paint all the details, logos, and little emblems that are all over the helmet. So what I did was I made myself a little Photoshop file, printed it out on photo paper, and I'll use some Mod Podge to put it on. As I cut out each emblem, I use a Sharpie to color the edges black. Now if I didn't do this, you could easily see the edges of the cut paper. And I was happy to see that the Mod Podge didn't cause the printer ink to run. Then I noticed my mistake with the red stripe. Oh, I'm totally in the wrong spot. That red line is completely in the wrong spot. Oh. I just place it close to where it needs to go and move on. If I had more time, I could repaint the whole thing, but I needed to get this build done. I add the rest of the emblems on the right side and then the left side, adjusting the ones that I need because the lines are too close. Then I get to cut out the most complicated one. It's the Rebel logo that goes in the front of the visor. I needed to cut it out really close to the black printed line because I needed to see the gray in between the different pieces of the Rebel logo. Then I use a Sharpie to make sure all the white paper and all the edges are colored black. And I was surprised I managed to do it this well the first time. I figured I need to reprint new logos at least once. Some hot glue will hold the yellow goggles in place, and I add some silver dry brushing in different areas to weather the helmet and make it look scratched up. And a couple of coats of clear sealer will hide the shine of the Mod Podge and protect the acrylic paints. All the parts I used to make this project I picked up locally, or I already had them in some random box in the garage. Might have a couple of flaws, but I'm really not upset because I started with a $4 toy and an old basketball, and what I've got is a Rebel pilot helmet. Now I know that there's lots of different ways that you could make Poe's helmet, but this is how Odin makes. I have a Patreon page where I give away props made right here in the show, and it's the only place where I'll talk about my upcoming builds. If you like the video or have ideas for something for me to make, please leave them in the comments below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture. They don't fit. Ah, damn it. I didn't think about this. I just painted. I was in a hurry. Damn it.